Good evening, everyone. I am Ria, and I'll be your host for today's session. As the excitement builds for one of India's largest hackathon and NIT Rourkela's flagship tech event, Hack NITR 5.0, we are thrilled to launch a series of pre-event speaker sessions featuring leading tech professionals. As one of India's largest student-run hackathons, Hack NITR 5.0 promises to be a game changer, and these sessions will equip you with the knowledge and inspiration in this high octane event. We are thrilled to have you all at our very first session by Mr. Tarun Jain.
Hello everyone. Am I audible?
Hello, sir.
Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You can call me Tarun.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. I am Ria, and I'll be your host for today's session. As the excitement builds for one of India's largest hackathon and NIT Rourkela's flagship tech event, Hack NITR 5.0, we are thrilled to launch a series of pre event speaker sessions featuring leading tech professionals. As one of India's largest student run hackathons, Hack NITR 5.0 promises to be a game changer, and these sessions will help you equip with knowledge and inspiration to thrive in this high octane event. We are thrilled to have you all at our very first session by Mr. Tarun Jain, a data scientist at AI Planet, a machine learning expert, a YouTube content creator, and a fellow coding enthusiast like all of us. His 80 plus blog posts and active involvement in renowned tech communities speaks volumes. Today, he is here to demystify generative AI and unleash its potential for your Hack and ITR journey. As we are ready to begin, I would request you all to keep posting the questions in the comments, and all of them will be answered at the end of the session. Now, I would request Tarun sir to proceed with this session ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ria. Thank you for the introduction. It's great to be here. And first of all, I see all the excitement in the comments. Many people are excited for this session. And one thing, what you can do is you can drop off this sir thing. You can just address me as Tarun, and that will be great. And generative AI has been for a very long time, but it has come into the existing for every common people in the past few months, or I can just say 1 year now. I'll quickly tell the agenda of today's talk. In today's talk, first we will talk about careers and myth in generative AI. Then we will look into a drawing board and we will think how you need to think for a problem statement for the hackathons and how you can win it as well. And then I have three code demos that I will demonstrate so that anyone can get started with generative AI with a very minimum coding experience. The only prerequisite that you need is Python. That's it. So let me quickly share my screen. Uh, just let me know if my screen is visible or not. I hope my screen is visible. Just an update. Ria, can you just update if my screen is visible? Great. I see my screen is visible. So once again, everyone, welcome back to this yet another AI talk where we will explore about generative AI, careers and myth, and then we will look into code demo. So before we start, here is a small introduction about myself. Ria might have already have introduced. So I'm a DevRel and a data scientist at AI Planet. It's a Belgium-based AI startup, and I'm also a Google developer expert in machine learning with MediaPipe and generative AI as my expertise. And then recently, I've also started sharing my content on generative AI at AI with Tarun. And previously, I was also part of Google Summer of Code 2023 at an organization called CA Microscope. And talking about hackathons, just like you, I was also a student and I was very excited about hackathons. And I have won 6 hackathons. One of them was international hackathon. And in my free time, I watch anime and I read manga. So that's my hobby. One Piece is my favorite. And if you hate One Piece, we can have conversation on LinkedIn. So fine. So let's talk about generative AI. So before we can proceed with my slides, I just wanted to know when you hear a word called generative AI, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? You can just tell anything that comes to your mind. I'll just wait for a few seconds and let's see, when it comes to generative AI, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? I see few comments. Great, Arun. ChatGPT. Well, that's an obvious question because ChatGPT was the one that made every one of us introduced to AI. AI generating image. That's right. Gen AI that can generate it anywhere and at time of need. That's true. Playground AI. There are so many things, right? In generative AI we have different kind of data. The main thing in machine learning or generative deep learning, I usually address generative AI as generative deep learning. We deal with images, we deal with videos, and when we talk about images and videos, we have mid journey, as someone of you have said, we have playground.ai, we have dali, and at the other end around, we also have ChatGPT, where we have text based. So AI tools are everywhere, and every one of us just know what generative AI is. In our particular session, we'll go more deep into what generative AI is. As a whole, AI covers the entire topic. Under AI, not everyone can use tools if you don't have the algorithms behind it. And in order to implement these algorithms, we have machine learning and deep learning. And machine learning is mainly a subset of AI where you train your models based on your input data. And when you talk about machine learning, you have input and you also have output. Based on this, you identify certain predictive learning and you identify the patterns so that your model can learn. We have supervised learning, we have unsupervised learning, and it's a very quite in-depth concept when we talk about machine learning. And few of the libraries that you can use is scikit-learn, it is also known as sklearn, which is quite famous when it comes to machine learning algorithms. And moving on, if you want to dive deep into generative AI, if you want to get into generative AI, the first step is you need to understand what a programming language is. And then you need to play around with statistics, probabilities. Once you understand these two concepts, core concept of statistics, probability, and linear algebra, you are very much confident to get into machine learning, where you can build ML algorithms. And if you want to dive more deep, this is where we have deep learning. And in deep learning, the most thing what you will be working on is neural networks. And in neural network, again, we have multiple subdivision. In subdivision, we have convolution neural network where you are dealing with images. Then we have recurrent neural network where you are again dealing with text based data. And if you want to get into deep learning, obviously there are multiple frameworks we have TensorFlow, we have PyTorch, we also have JAX. And TensorFlow and JAX are developed by Google team, and PyTorch is developed by Meta team. So once you're comfortable with these topics, which is machine learning and deep learning, then comes generative AI. Generative AI is been in the market or is been in the research ever since 2014, when a paper called Generative Adversarial Network came out. And this concept was very unique. Like, you can generate deep fake. So during that time, deep fake was in a very starting stage, where you can say where you could generate fake images. Now that fake images has evolved to a very next level, where you can bring a high level accuracy of human face detection or deep fakes. And this particular use cases of deep fakes or changing your particular image style, all this thing comes under GANs, and that was the beginning point of generative AI. And obviously there were multiple things that came out on the text based as well. We have something called as transformers. In transformers, if you look at subblocks, you have word, you have t5, you have robota, and also you have something called as GPT. So all these algorithms are under the part of generative AI, which can predict what is happening next, like predicting the new pixel for your image generation, predicting the next word for your text based. So all these auto regressive models are existing, but not to give you much of the context because this particular session I want to keep it very user friendly. We'll just talk about high level, and if you really want to get in depth, we can have conversation later. Now, what are the careers you can take in generative AI or in general machine learning? So there are tons of options that are available, and I'll give my point of view. In my point, the first thing will always be research, because when I started my career in machine learning, the first thing was I was a research intern at CCCIR, and during that time of my internship, I got to know how people build things in a very depth way, and that's where I got to know about image processing. And if you are into computer vision, you might have heard what image processing is. That's how you can enhance or how you deal with pixel values in your image. I got to know different techniques, different algorithms, and you get to know what researchers think by reading research papers. So my always recommendation from my side will be, if you want to build your career in machine learning or generative AI, there is obviously endless option, but my first priority will always be research, and second priority will be obviously open source, because GSOC was something I wanted to always be part of. And with GSOC, my connection with open source also increased. And if you want to get into open source, it's very tricky, but it's also achievable. The only thing is you need to have in-depth knowledge of whatever concept you are learning. And most of the tools, what I spoke about, like TensorFlow, PyTorch, these are open source. And when you want to contribute to open source, the first option of yours should be adding new examples. In recent days, I've seen few Indians just updating readme.md. That is not the ideal way to start. The ideal way to always start open sources, look for any open source repository. There will always be a section of examples. If you can understand few examples and if you can recreate a new example, that is the best way to get started with open source. This will also increase your level of efficiency in building project. And in my case, if you are building side projects along with open source contribution, it's a better combo that you can ever imagine. So the first will be research, the second will be open source, and third will be building side projects. Now, when it comes to side projects, there might be lots of question. What should be my side project be like? This is where you need to look into different industry that you can build your side projects on. And for side project, these are the major industry which AI can be integrated in a very easier way. And my major focus will be on retail, because if you look at the market or industry value of retail, it's very huge. And if you can have any case studies, we will talk much in detail on how you need to build this case study, what are the use cases, what problem statement you need to look. This will also help you in hackathons, and it will also help you to upskill in your career. And we have supply chain, and supply chain again, your inventory management and all those things. In transportation, you will have computer vision stuff. Healthcare, probably the biggest industry as well, where human bias is a very challenging part. And education, probably from my side, it's the easiest way where you can implement AI. The most challenging part will be cybersecurity and construction, obviously healthcare as well. Retail is most popular one from my perspective of what I've seen. Retail, manufacturing, transportation is where you can add your expertise and build your side project on. How to build the side project and how you need to think of problem statement, we will look next after myth. That is, we will understand much in detail of what you need to do for hackathons in terms of AI or machine learning. Now, when we talk about AI and when we talk about generative AI or machine learning, it would be unfair if I don't mention Kaggle. Now, why do we need Kaggle? Let's understand this for just 2 minutes. Every one of us wants to learn something, wants to implement something, but where do we start? And when you think of where do we start, there are multiple people who are in this domain. They write lots of code, they just share their code. Now, when you want to write or when you want to get into a field, it's better to understand what other people are writing. And if you want to check other people code, what data set they are uploading. This is where Kaggle comes into the play. Kaggle main advantage is it provides lot of open source data set. You can just see, I don't know, this slide was made probably 2 months ago. This data is probably 2 months old. Now it might have touched more than 300K. It also has around 950K notebook. It is almost nearing to 1 million. So you can just imagine, if you want to understand Kaggle or if you want to get started with the IML community, Kaggle is the largest community in order to get started. You can find other people code, get the inspiration, see how they are writing the code, do little bit of modification and build your own algorithm or build your own code. And recently, Kaggle also have something called as models, because large language model is everywhere. Not just large language model, also image model, which we talk about open source models. It is probably everyone wants to use open source model. Why? Because it's free. You don't have any restriction when it comes to using this model. So what you can do is just go to Kaggle, create your account, use the data set, look at other people code, and Kaggle provides P100 runtime. It also provides 2x T4 GPU, and this is free of cost, so that anyone can just go out there and can use that inference, so that you can run a GPU based model only with free of cost on Kaggle. And you can use this 200 plus models, 2000 plus models. It can be Mistral, it can be Llama, it can be Zephyr, it can also be Stable Diffusion. And this is a part where you can learn new things by referring what others are doing. Now let's come back to the final part of my slides. That is, there are few myths in AI or generative AI which you should always stay out of this negativity. And one of the first myth, which is very common, is, will AI take my job? My answer to engineering students will be no, because it's very early to replace engineering freshers who have knowledge of what they need to build and what are the pinpoints of any project they want to build. And debugging AI code is probably very difficult, but if you are in field of content writing or copywriting, because not many engineers are in this field, if you are in this particular field, then it's high time you need to think of what you need to do next. So as from my perspective, if you are getting into industries like development or AI machine learning, it's good to have research expertise or at least 2 years of, not 2 years, 2 to 3 months of experience. You will be in a very good shape, and it's very too early for AI to take anyone's job. But as a fresher, just feel free. And one more thing is, privacy and data security is always been an issue, and it's always commendable because there are many people who are working on ethics and responsible AI. So AI is still safe. It's not that you're losing your privacy. There are few responsible AI startup who are tackling this problem statement. And AI is used in limited industry. That is a myth. It can literally be used in any enterprise, and you just have to integrate few algorithms. And now with the help of generative AI, you can build chatbot on a very enterprise level. So these are few myths which you can stay out of this. And yeah, that's it from the slides. We have few code demos and as well as how you need to think of problem statement. And if in case you want to learn more, you can join our Discord community for discussion and other thing. I'll just keep it for 10 seconds and I'll see if there are any questions. All right, I see Tarun. What's difference between ChatGPT and generative AI, or are they same? So my answer to this is, generative AI is a whole. Under generative AI, you have ChatGPT. ChatGPT is just an application of generative AI. So there are definitely different. You also have image generation based models, which comes under generative AI. ChatGPT is not the only one. Okay, we have few more. So can you suggest some books which will help me learn generative AI as a beginner? Sure. So two books which I'll definitely recommend is Deep Learning with Python. So this particular book will give you understanding of TensorFlow. It also has two chapters on generative AI, deep learning, not generative AI. Initially, this is what we call generative AI deep learning, but the market, based on what it is promoting, it has made generative deep learning into generative AI. Hey Tarun, I have, and one more book is Deep Learning with PyTorch. Deep Learning with Python, Deep Learning with PyTorch. These are the two best books which you can start with. There are also other books like NLP. You need to decide when you get into ML. There are two paths. Either you can go to computer vision, either you can get to NLP. The two books I recommended you is it will give you rough level to understanding of computer vision, NLP. Then you can choose your path. When you go to computer vision, right, you have stable diffusion. When you come to NLP, you have large language model. So you need to decide what your interest is, and then you can proceed. Hey Tarun, I had hackathon previously, and someone asked me question. The question was from where AI gets information to give us. Is there any type of database where AI got? So usually when we talk about generative AI, right, it has been trained on very large scale of data. You can think of fine tuning because as what we build, it's related to fine tuning. If there is any base model, we just use a new data, we feed that to our base model, and we generate something new. But when it comes to the base model, how do they get data? They are already trained on large amount of data which are scraped. Now if I have to give you an example of ChatGPT, it uses data from Scale AI, and also it used few data from Upwork. So what Scale AI does is it annotates your data. So based on the annotated data, you can directly tokenize it and train your model. This is very expensive because when you have to train large parameters of the model, you need to have that much of data, and it takes too much of time in order to train the models. That's where we go with fine tuning. But in every case, you have a data which you're feeding it to the model. But without data, you can't have the model. To your initial question, where we get this data, whichever providers have annotated data set, such as Scale AI, a proper example for ChatGPT. Okay, so I guess we'll proceed. We'll take few more questions later. If not, we'll run out of time. So I'll stop sharing and I'll share my drawing board. So now we'll understand how you need to get to the problem statement for the hackathons or your personal project. I just hope my screen is visible. Great. I guess my screen is visible now. Now, first thing is what you need to do is understand what industry you want to get into. What I'll tell is pick an industry. And the industry I already showed you in my slides. You have retail, you have transportation, you have healthcare. You can just go out there, pick what industry you want to get into, and you need to do little bit of survey. What you need to do is do survey of few startups. So each startup has a page, not each, but most of the startup has page of case studies. So once you pick an industry, do little bit of survey, make a list of case studies. These case studies, you will get a certain page on few startup. I'll give you an example. You will have marvic.ai. You also have AI Planet where I work. So what you need to do is just get the idea for which particular industry, what are the case studies. You can also use ChatGPT for this. So what you can do is in order to get the case studies, you can also use ChatGPT. Just a second. Let me remove this. All right. So in order to do case studies research, you can also use ChatGPT to get idea for which particular industry you need your case studies. So once you have the case studies in your mind, based on those case studies, subdivide few use cases. You need to divide your case studies into few sub use cases, and use cases is nothing but your project that you want to build. Okay, I'm just writing few of them so that you can just pick at least few 5 to 10 use cases. Understand this again. Pick an industry, look into the case studies. In order to get the idea, my first recommendation will be survey few startup, check at their case study page. If you are not able to find them, then directly go to ChatGPT and it will randomly generate few data. If not, you can also use Gemini, which Google is using. So you will get the real time data. Just a second. Let me remove this. Okay, so once you do the case studies, right, the next step is you need to define the problem statement. Now, how do we define the problem statement? Now that you have case studies, the next step is whatever case studies you have. Now, let's suppose you are doing video tracking on transportation. For video tracking transportation, there are multiple ideas, there are multiple problem statement that you have out there. So, what you need to do is once you have your use case, use a chat model again. Use Gemini or ChatGPT and generate few problem statements. Now what you need to do is generate problem statement. And I don't know what is the rules of this particular hackathons. If in case you're already given the problem statement, that is well and good. And if you're working on side project and if you need what best projects you need, you can look at this way. This will also boost your resume projects. Pick an industry, case studies. After case studies, make a list of use cases. For each use case, I repeat, for each use case, generate problem statement using any large language model. My preference will be Gemini because it gives equivalent to GPT-4. If you have GPT-4, that is well and good. If not, you can just use any one of them and decide the problem statement. And once you define the problem statement, try to print problem statement at least 10 different 10 problem statements. So once you have 10 different problem statement, you will get the idea of what you need to build, and then you need to look into these similar projects on Kaggle if it is available or not. So once you define the problem statement, look into similar code, look into similar code on Kaggle. So you will find few ideas that you can pick it up, and once you have those ideas, that's where you need to start your hacking. So this will be my high level flow of what you need to do. And tech stack, you can pick any tech stack because not every time people stick to a single tech stack. There are multiple tech stacks people does it. The main thing is you need to understand what your problem statement is. So this is the flow. You can just take this screenshot, and if you have any better way, feel free to use whatever you need. But this is how I'll approach and how I did my hackathon projects as well, and it really worked in my case. And in some case it might not work in few of people, but this I can guarantee for 80% of the time this is the best solution to get your problem statement. So let's start with the code demo. Before code demo, I have few slides to share. Okay, should we take the questions or should we proceed? You can just tell in the chat, should we proceed with the code demo? I'll stop sharing my screen so that I'll upload a new screen. So now we'll directly dive into a project that you can build for your generative AI. Thanks, Vivek. Thanks for the confirmation. All right. So now let's understand prompt engineering. And there is a application called Retrieval Augmented Generation. To those who want to build generative AI based application in this hackathon, this is probably the best solution that you can try it out. So I'll make you understand what this is in a very simpler way. All right. So I'll share my screen. I hope it is visible. Sorry, it should be slideshow. Great. So now I have a prompt. Since I'm from Bangalore, there is a place in Bangalore called Discount Temple, and I just randomly asked that at what time ISKCON temple opens. So obviously, I need to get a time as the response. I don't need anything else. I just need time. But when I ask this kind of question to a chat GPT or any language model, it will give you a high level understanding that it can vary. But this kind of response is good. I'm not telling this is wrong. Obviously, ISKCON is there in multiple places and the time can vary. But as a user, I need specific answer such as exact time. Obviously, you can tell me, hey, what is this prompt? You can directly go to Google and you can search. But here, the understanding is how you need to pass the context. So this is where if you want to get your exact response, you need to do little bit of prompt engineering. And in order to do prompt engineering, the best way is pass the context, ask your prompt. And if I do this way, if you can see the response, it is much better than previous. Why? Now my chat model is giving me the exact response that I need. But one downside is I'm giving the context. Not every time I can give the context. So this is one downside. We will see how we can solve this issue. And if you look at my different prompts that I used, initially I just asked at what time is temple open. This is what we call zero shot prompting. Zero shot prompting is when you give your prompt directly. And few shot prompting is nothing but you have a context, you write your prompt, and then you feed it to your large language model. So these are the two prompt engineering technique which you can easily master. So now let's talk about what is the issue. We looked into the two examples. There was an issue. Why? And the major issue is hallucination. Hallucination is nothing but when I need specific responses, it gives me some out of context answer, which I don't need. And this is an area where large language model eventually get into, which is hallucination. Many people treat hallucination as a bug, and few of them treat hallucination as feature. So from my case, I'll tell hallucination to be a feature because model is trained on specific data and sometimes it will add its intelligence and we can't do anything in that area. And the second downside of large language model is knowledge cutoff. If I go to ChatGPT and if I ask who won under 19 India versus Australia World Cup, obviously it won't answer because under 19 2024 World Cup just happened 2 days or 3 days before, and your ChatGPT doesn't has the knowledge of the updated one. So there is certain knowledge cutoff. Either it is 2021, in the recent version it has 2023 around September, which I'm not sure of. But there is certain knowledge cutoff which ChatGPT or any large language model, if it is not there in the data, it doesn't understand. And the last thing is lack of domain specific factual response. Now let's suppose you want to build a chatbot for your gaming company. For your gaming company, you have certain manuals, and when you have these certain manuals to your ChatGPT model, there are certain responses which are not exactly correct, and there is certain domain specific knowledge cutoff between your language model because it is trained on general purpose language, not on domain specific. When I talk about domain specific, we have healthcare, we have finance, we have insurance. There are different domain, also gaming. So there is a knowledge cutoff. In order to solve this issue, we have something called as retrieval augmented generation. There are three words you need to focus on. I will tell you the importance of each three words: retrieval, augmented, and generation. And if I have to give you understanding of what retrieval augmented generation does is, the first thing starts with your query. This query can be at what time is temple open. When we talk about generative AI models, you need to pass numbers or vectors, not text. So in order to provide text to your language model, you're using certain layer which is called embedding model, so that your text is represented into a vector embeddings which is represented in a vector space. And once you convert this your vector embedding, it will look into a database called vector database. So vector database is very different than normal database because It can perform similarity search based on certain algorithms. It can be cosine similarity. It can be MMR, which stands for maximum marginal relevancy, and it can also do on similarity search with threshold value. So there are different search technique which you can perform with help of vector database, and based on this, it will return few context. So let's understand this. You ask a prompt, and that converts into a vector embedding, and your prompt is at what time is contemple open. When you look into this particular query in a vector database, a context is written. This context can be the time, which we looked into our second slide. The context is nothing but this particular thing. So if you look at morning time and evening time, this is what we call context. So vector database will return that context, and it is passed to a language model. Now based on the query, based on the context, LLM will generate a response. This is what we call in context learning, which is part of RAG. Now one question everyone should have is, how do we feed our data into vector database? So it's very simple, and first we need to get an external data. So external data can be your PDF, it can be your CSV file, it can be document, it can be YouTube video, it can be website page, it can be Notion link, Drive link, any data. Just take your data. You need to load. By loading your data, I mean do little bit of pre-processing. By pre-processing, I mean splitting your data. And once you split your data, still if you look at the step, we have data, we are creating chunking. Chunking is nothing but if you have a larger context of data, you're creating a smaller segment of it. As far till second step, we are dealing with text, but in our language model we don't need text, we need embedding. So this is where we have embedding model, which will convert our chunks into embedding model, and it will store that in a vector database. So this is the simple 4-step process. We will look how to do it in the code. So this is pretty easy, right? Get your data, do pre-processing, split your data, create embeddings, store that in a vector database. That's it. Now let's get back to the original retrieval augmented generation. There are three words. So now we will address what retrieval does, what augmentation does, and what generator does. The two most important are retriever and generator. Augment is very common. You can also skip augmentation, but retriever and generator are very important. So let's understand what retriever is. For retriever, the first primary criteria is a user writes a prompt. That prompts gets converted into embedding. Based on your embedding, you will look into vector database, which will return few context. So this context is returned based on certain search technique. If you can see my diagram properly, after vector DB, there is something called as search. So this search can be similarity search, or it can be maximum marginal relevancy search. So based on your search technique, you are returning few documents. Now, how many documents? You can define that by a variable called k. So if you tell k to be 2, it will return a document, which is 2 documents. If you tell k to be 5, it will return 5 documents. So this is first step. The first step is just retrieve relevant data. How do we retrieve relevant data? Just convert your query, user query, and that embedding is looked into vector database, which gives you relevant response. And once you do this, the second step is augmentation. And augmentation is how you can write better prompt. You have a query, there will be certain prompt template. Now I'll give you an example. Let's suppose my query is what is black hole. Now, what is black hole? Black hole is not there in my data. So eventually it should not answer. In order to tell your machine learning model or LLM model, whenever there is a response which is not there in the context, don't answer. So this is certain instruction. So whenever you have to pass any instruction, it's nothing but a prompt. You need to write that in the prompt. That becomes your prompt template. So the query is getting added in prompt template, and it is augmented prompt. And everything, we have a code demo, not to worry. I'll go step by step in the code demo as well. But just make sure you understand three-step process on what retrieval does, what augmentation does, and the final part is generation. So generation is very simple. Retriever will return the document, and augment, we you have a prompt. So in few shot prompting or in context learning, you're passing the context, you're passing the prompt, both are passed to a large language model. Now based on your response and context, it will give you a response. So why is this different than few shot prompting? Few shot prompting, you have to pass context every time you ask a query. In RAG, you just have to build this pipeline so that you can directly ask query, and RAG will take care of retrieving the document and adding it to a large language model. So this is a automated pipeline for few shot prompting. So this is it from the slides. We will quickly move on with the code demo. So I hope my code demo is visible. Just confirm if it is visible. I'll zoom my screen a bit. I will also share the link. Let me share the screen so that if anyone wants to follow along with me, you can do that. There is a GitHub repository which I've created. So this GitHub repository is nothing but Awesome Brag. In the Awesome Brag, there are multiple notebooks. This will also help you for hackathon. You have data set like chat with website, you have advanced RAG, you also have multimodal example where your input is image and you can talk with your image. In our case, we are using build RAG pipeline using open source large language model. And you can click on this collab link. I'll send this link. I'll send this link to the organizers so that they can add this to the screen. So what you need to do is just go to that repository. Once you go to that repository, the first use case, how to build RAG pipeline using open source large language model, you can click on this collab notebook. And once you click on that collab notebook, make sure to create a new copy. Okay, you need to create a new copy. How can you do that? Just save a copy in Drive. It will create a new notebook for you, and you can experiment in a new notebook. And one thing, why are we using open source large language model? So we have OpenAI. OpenAI is nothing but closed source, which is proprietary. They are not sharing their model weights to the public. Whereas open source large language model, anyone can use it. And the model weights are available on Hugging Face. So there is a comment. Okay, fine. So what you need to do is you need to create a account on Hugging Face. You can also find this video on my YouTube channel, Build Rag Open Source. You can find how you need to build your open source project. In this video, instead of doing live coding, because we have just 10 to 15 minutes left, I won't do a live coding, but I'll go line by line and I will explain you each and every step. The first step is installation. And in order to build RAG, I hope my screen is visible. Great. So the first step is we need to do installation, and whatever I spoke, building the RAG pipeline where you're connecting your data to vector database and vector database to a large language model, it is very time consuming if you do it particular component by component. In order to make this entire pipeline very easy, we have a library called LangChain. So the best library right now to get started with generative AI. So my personally belief is if you can master generate LangChain, then probably whether you're a developer or data science, you have understanding of generative AI. But my personal suggestion will always be go through the process of generative deep learning. This process is for developers, not for data scientists, but that is fine either. Install LangChain, and we have something called as FIAS. FIAS is the vector database which was developed by Meta, Facebook. And you also have one more vector database, ChromaDB. You can either use FIAS or ChromaDB. And regarding vector database, right, where do we store the data? One thing is you can store it in memory, which is local. If not, you need to use client, which is cloud. You just have to get API keys and a endpoint URL, and you can use the cloud version. So once you do the installation, we will move on with the building rack pipeline. And in building rack pipeline, let's understand primary four step. You get the data, load the data and do the chunking, create the embeddings of it, and store that in a vector database. Again, I'll repeat: load the data, do the chunking, create the embedding, store that in a vector database. Four step. And if you see, right, this particular use case is chat with website. So you can take any website you need, add that website URL. Second thing is do the chunking. And in order to do chunking, it is also called splitting the text. We have something called as character text splitter. And embedding, we are using Hugging Face Inference API embeddings. There are two embeddings that you can use. This is open source. Hugging Face embeddings, Hugging Face Inference API embeddings. When you use Hugging Face embeddings, you need to download sentence transformers. So sentence transformers will load the model in your system. In order to avoid loading the model, we will go with Inference API so that that model is being loaded on Hugging Face Cloud. So make sure you are using Hugging Face Inference API embedding so that this process is very fast. And the fourth step is get your vector store. Vector store is nothing but your vector database. Either you can use Fias or you can use ChromaDB. And then you have Hugging Face up, which is your large language model. And then you have something called as retrieval QA. So what retrieval QA does is it will combine your large language model with the retriever. So it combines generator and retriever, and you can run the chain. So once this is done, the next step is you need to get your access token. In order to get the access token, go to huggingface.co, click on your profile icon at the top right corner. You need to click on your profile, go to settings, then you need to navigate on access token. So access token will be on live left sidebar. Click on that access token. You need to create new token, assign it to be right, and you're ready to go. So once you do this process, you need to run this particular code. So what this code will do is it will save your key in an environment variable, and make sure you are giving exact same thing, a king face hub API token. So far we have not done anything. We have just imported few statement, and then we are setting up our API key. That's it. Now starts the actual part. And the first part is you can get any URL that you want which has text in it. Once you have your website URL, use web-based loader. Web-based loader, what it will do is it will take your data, it will extract and load your content. This is what we call it as ETL. ETL stands for extract, transfer, and load. So what web-based loader will do is it will extract your data, and loader will load your data. So once this is done, the next step is you need to do chunking. So chunking is very simple. What you can do is you just have to pass your document. Your document is your entire data, and if you want to subdivide your data, you need to do chunk size, which is 256. You can also keep it as 512 or 1024 based on your size of the data. If size of data is very big, use 512 or 1024. So once you do the splitting, you can just verify. And chunk overlap, what chunk overlap will do is, let's imagine you have the data, you're dividing your data into 10 chunks. If your chunk overlap is 0, suppose my this particular sentence, right, just notice it is ending at no more. Wait, let me give you an example here. So I have a data, I'm dividing that into chunk. So make sure you're looking into uh, just a second. Yeah, so look into this chunks 0. So what happens is it is ending at I am actively involved in various. So if you look at chunk 3, it is starting with involved in various community. So this involved in various, right? if you see this involved in various in chunk 3 and involved in various in chunk 2, it is same. So this is what we call as overlapping 20. If you set overlap to be 0, so what will happen is I am actively involved in various will be your chunk 2, and your chunk 3 will start from communities. So if your chunk overlap is 0, it will start from communities. If your chunk lap is 50, then probably it will take from my coding journey and I'm actively involved. So you need to run few experiment and you need to see what your chunk overlap should be. Ideally, we use chunk overlap to be 50 or 100 based on the size of the data. So two step is done. First step is get your data. Second step is split your data. And third step is you need to initialize your embedding model. And if you remember, we got the access token. We need to pass that access token and you need to define your embedding model. So once you have the embedding model, you need to pass your chunk and embedding to the vector database. We look this into the diagram, get the data, split the data, create the embedding, store that in a vector database. This is what we did so far. And we have different components. If you look at Hugging Face Inference API, it's a component. Chroma is a component, which is your Chroma DB. And once you create your vector store, I told you it can perform search technique. And how do it perform search technique? By doing similarity search, you can see. So what I did was I took a user query, I ran a similarity search, I asked where does Tarun work. If you look at my chunk, it has Devrel at AI Planet, which is true. And when I made my portfolio, I also was part of embedchain.ai as a community lead. So it has also given that GDE in ML. So this is what retrieving it does. So store that in a vector database, perform search technique, return the document. So far we are returning the document. This is where you need to use retrievers. So now what retriever will do is it will define your search type, go back to the slides. In the slides we had query, after query we had embedding, and then we had vector store. If you can see this vector store acts as retriever. I can understand most of you are very new to this, but if you look at my awesome rag, you will find tons of collab notebook to give you a rough idea. And there is also few blog articles and few videos which you can refer to. And there is time for hackathon. You can master it in a single day. So this vector store will act as the retriever, and there are two things you need to specify. One is k value and one more is your search type. Search type by default is similarity. You can also name it as mmr. And once this is done, you can get your relevant document. If you see the response, you have document, again you have document, you have document, you have document. There are four documents which are getting retrieved. Okay, you can set your number. Most probably if it is very large, then make sure your k value is 5. If it is very small, you can keep your k value to be 2. Now we have completed with the retriever part. So retriever, augmented, generation. Retriever is done, augmented and generation is pending. So in order to run generator, as I told you earlier, retriever and generator is important. Augmentation is very simple. You just have to use a prompt. So in generator model, it's nothing but your large language model. So initially, right? Initially, you defined an environment variable. So environment variable is where you're defining your key. This is important when you define a large language model. If you see a large language model, you're not adding the API key. You're directly using the environment variable. Two things you need to notice here. And the first thing is Hugging Face H4 Zephyr model is our large language model, which is open source. And why am I using this? It has a very less hallucination index compared to OpenAI. Not many people of you has OpenAI credits because it is not free. And if you are looking for a free alternative solution, go with Zephyr. And there are few parameters that you need to adjust. Temperature 0.5 so that you can avoid creativeness or randomness, and maximum new token. So whenever large language model returns a response, what should be the length of it? That will be decided by these tokens, max new tokens. And there is one more new variable. So I created this notebook a month before, but recently, just 2 weeks before, there was an update in TensorFlow transformers. You need to define return full text to be false. So you need to define your return full text to be false. You can find a latest tutorial or latest notebook in the Awesome Brag repository. So this is the new version. Why do we need this? So when you run this model, right, it will also give you prompt with the response. As a final response, I don't need prompt to be visible to the user. In order to make this vanish, in order to make this hide, we use return full text to be false. By default, it is true, which is a new parameter which I saw recently. You can define it. And then this comes your prompt template, and this is your query. The query is nothing but name the projects Tarun has worked on, and then you have a prompt. So prompt is nothing but you have a system prompt, you have a user prompt. So user prompt is nothing but name the projects Tarun has worked on. System prompt is where you need to define what your model does. Suppose if you are in finance or medical domain, you have to give instruction in a specific way. If it is related to medical, then only answer. So here, if you can see, you are an AI assistant that follows instruction extremely well. Please be truthful and give direct answer. So this is a normal template, and we have completed 3 steps. The 3 step is retriever. This is the first step, retriever, and this is the second step, creating your augmented prompt. Third step is your generator. All three are done, and then you need to combine all these things by creating a chain. This is where langchain is very famous. In order to create chain is part of langchain. So you just have to run retrieval qa. And again, langchain is also advanced. If you look at my GitHub repository link here, there is something called as LCEL. So LCEL stands for LangChain, uh, LangChain Expression Language. What this particular advanced version of LangChain does is it removes the retrieval QA, and it will create a pipeline which can be used for streaming, so that it gives you very quick response. All the collab notebooks are available here. And once you do that, let's come back to the code. And once you define your chain, you just have to run the prompt. And once you run the prompt, you just have to print the response. As you can see, in addition of MangaPy was my project, hardware based hyperspectral image compression project using MATLAB. Tarun has worked on variety of other projects. One of the project was computer vision project. You can check my portfolio. This is the exact response, and this is generative AI. If I ask this prompt on ChatGPT, like what Tarun has built, definitely it will tell who is Tarun. But if you're doing RAG, and if you're following the step, and then if you're asking this prompt, you will get the response. So this is very important area of building generative AI projects in Hackathon. It's very simple. Just understand how you need to store in vector database, and 3 step. So the 3 step is retrieval augmented generation, and 4 step is for how to store in your vector database. I'll share the slides. Let me share the slides with you. So I'll probably share the slides in a while. Let's continue with the code. So we have almost completed the code, and this is the thing which I was talking about. If you look at this particular structure, this is what LangChain expression language looks like. We don't have retrieval QA, it's just a chain. And for beginners, I'll just recommend to use retrieval QA and run the prompt, get the response. And you can use a Streamlit. Streamlit app, you can build an interface, you can ask a prompt and generate the response. It's very simple. You have all the source code available on GitHub. So this is the first use case. I'll quickly show you second demo. I'll not run the code or explain the code. because this particular is just to motivate you that there are different options. So far we only looked into text. I didn't wanted to show this before because it might be too much for someone to grab everything. So this particular thing is only for understanding or motivation purpose, not for code. And if those who want to get into computer vision, and if you want to build stable diffusion model, you have a library called diffusers. And in diffusers, just like transformers, there are multiple open source models available. And one of the most famous model is Runaway ML. Runaway ML is a website which has more than 30 plus AI tools. One of them is stable diffusion. You just have to run a pipeline from the trained model, use that model name, and run a prompt. That's it, and it will generate an image. So if you see a horse racing near beach, 8K realistic photography, you are getting this image. And if you want to go for advanced, so there is something called as SDL, which is an advanced version, which is your SDXL. SD stands for stable diffusion, and XL is the latest version of stable diffusion. And if you see this video, if you see this image, you also have beach backside. But if you see at this particular image, there is no beach because it will only target main keyword. And in order to write a better prompt, you can look into lexica.ai. It has various default prompt images, and you can take inspiration from there. So this is a normal notebook on how you can get started with diffuser, and this notebook is on how you can build the use case. It's the same thing but little bit of more coding, but in most of the cases you're just using a default model and little bit of pre-processing. And if you see this image generating a QR code, I don't know how many of you have seen this, but McDonald's is using AI generated image. When they give you the tray, there is a feedback form. For that feedback form, they are using the QR code AI, and this is one application that you can use. And all the source code, I'll be sharing it in a very short while. So this is it from the demo, and I hope you understood what LangChain can do, what is retrieval augmented generation, what are the different prompt techniques. Slides is something I will share you, and if you have questions, feel free to ask me. Meanwhile, I'll just share all the notebooks to you. Organizers, I guess, have completed the code on presentation. You can take over. So I'm sending you the link of the collab notebook. Just a second. So this particular is for QR code AI, and this particular notebook is for text to image. And I've sent both the collab notebook to the organizers. It will be helpful if you can add this on the screen. So yeah, I've sent both the collab notebook, and if anyone is live, we can take the questions. So yeah, that's the link for QR code AI. Thank you so much, Jit. Thanks for the compliment. Okay, there is one question. For each response, we have to set a query by our own. I sure it's not. Then how do we provide? See, for each response, query is what user will give. Prompt template will not change. So your query will be updated based on your user choice. You can just create a format. String format, F string, and you can directly pass the user query. Template will not change. Template is based on your use case. If you are in education background, I mean, if you are building a use case in education where you want your model to perform expert mathematical formulas, so your system prompt will differ. You will just tell you are an expert mathematical model, just answer the question. If it is not relevant to you, just tell I don't know. So the template will remain same and query will differ based on user. This can only be done using Python or any other languages like JavaScript. So you can use JavaScript. LangChain has a very good documentation for both JavaScript and Python. The steps is same. So the steps is simple. Just understand this 4:3 rule. 4 rule is to how you need to store your data in vector database. The 3 rule is retrieval augmented generation. If you understand this 4:3 ratio, I mean 4:3 rule, you can build RAG pipeline using Python or JavaScript. Both are supported. Okay, someone asked, how do we deploy these models? So in order to deploy this model, you can use Streamlit and then you can deploy it on a custom source. If not, you need to use cloud services like Azure, create a VIA machine and deploy it. But usually this is not my area. I usually use Streamlit app for hackathons and I use share.streamlit.io to deploy my application. So you can do this for hackathon as well. Just if you don't know development and if you are a data scientist, you can just build your code and you can use Streamlit to deploy your application. It's very simple if you want to deploy your Streamlit app. So, how can generative AI effectively be used to brainstorm new ideas and approach to hackathon challenges? So, as I mentioned earlier, when I draw the block diagrams, generative AI is very useful. Just a second. Yeah, sorry for that. And yeah, in order to use generative AI and brainstorming ideas, understand what industry you want to contribute and pick case studies and use generative AI for brainstorming your problem statement. Then you need to look into Kaggle, get the relevant ideas to build your code. So this is a best approach you can use for brainstorming ideas. Yeah, if you have more questions, then probably you can again join our Discord channel. I'll be ready to help you. Can we integrate these models hardware use cases? For hardware use cases, you have media pipe which you can use, but media pipe is mainly supported for small tasks like text classification, image classification, audio, and all those things. And currently Gemini Mini is not yet publicly available. Hardware is a very difficult task. Either if you want to do smaller like object detection, use media pipe. If not, for LLM, I don't think I've seen much of the progress on hardware. You can explore MLX library. I don't know if it will be suitable or not. And MediaPipe will be my suggestion. That's what I can recommend. And if not, Gemini Mini, but I don't think that is publicly available. Yeah. Any more questions? All right. I guess if we don't have any more question, all the best for the hackathon. I hope you guys build amazing projects.
Okay, so seeing the number of questions, it is quite evident how incredible the session was. And I guess it has helped all of us to develop a better understanding towards generative AI and deep learning. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. And it was great interacting with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Are we live or
Yeah, yeah, we're live.
okay? Should we wait for more questions or is it a
No, I guess it's done.
great, great? Thank you everyone. All the best for the hackathon and build amazing projects.
Thank you. Okay, cool. So, thank you everyone for joining in. There are a quite few sessions lined up for you in the coming week, and I request you to join us there as well. And if you have any queries which are unanswered, you can put it in our Discord server or just post it in the Hack and ITR WhatsApp group. Till then, goodbye. Thank you. See ya.